while I was in the car with my mum. I jumped out the car on a road. I ran into the road and I took off all my clothes. And I just lay in the middle of the road and caused a traffic jam while I was like laughing hysterically at the sky because I thought this is the last thing they expect.
Holding in the way, that's what I heard them say. They used to heed the words he said, but that was yesterday. Gold will turn to gray and youth will fade away. They'll never care about you, call you holding in the way.
Good morning and welcome to another episode of Old Men in Chairs. You know, I've been going down the Ren rabbit hole. I've been watching a lot of Ren videos, trying to find another one that I want to react to, and I'm still struggling. Admittedly, he's one of the greatest musical talents around, but because of his subject matter, it's hard for me to find a video I'm really comfortable with. I thought I would do a little more background on how he got where he is, and I stumbled upon this interview that he gave back in October in conjunction with the release of his latest album, Sick Boy. And I started watching it, and oh my God, not only is he a great musician, but what a knowledgeable fellow. I mean, he explains some things in here that I never knew, and I'm a voracious reader. Watch a little bit of this and learn.
Hello, beautiful human. I am Zach. That is Dan. And we welcome to the studio. Ren is here.
Hey.
Hello, hello, hello.
You have a great tone, and it comes through in the music you make because a lot of it is done in the style of poetry. Is that kind of correct, or am I totally off base?
Yeah, I think I weave a lot of poetry into what I'm doing, for sure. A lot of spoken word, a lot of hip-hop. I mean, some of the best hip-hop, it has its origins in that, really. Rhyme and poetry, what rap stands for.
I don't know if that's true. I've never heard that rap stands for rhyme and poetry, but it does make sense. We did a reaction early on to "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised," and that was one of the very first rap songs. Came out around 1970, and I'm forgetting the name of the artist right now, but that came out of spoken word mixed with poetry. I always thought rap came more from the slang expression to rap, which meant to just talk on a particular subject at length, you know, give a rap.
Do you look at that today and go, I wish the doctor would have told me exactly what I needed to know at the very beginning? Or are you somewhat grateful for the journey that it's put you on?
It's a difficult question, man. It's a very difficult question because and I guess it comes back to whether you see things as a gift or a curse, which is the choice. And, you know, if there was a parallel universe with a Ren that hadn't gone through those things, would I be the artist that I am? Would I be right? I wouldn't be talking about the topics that I am, but how would the course of my life transpired? And I think it always just comes down to a choice. So you might as well choose the thing that makes you feel better about it, which is that it's a gift, right? Because if I look at it like a gift and I look at it like a fresh perspective, then it justifies all of that stuff happening. And it's unusual to think about a parallel universe where none of those things happened, because I think with that comes a little bit of negativity towards my situation now. So I think the decision to be grateful it really serves me.
That is a tough question. I mean, this man has been through the mill, and to the point of, you know, incredible amounts of pain, as he's going to describe, leading to a total psychotic break. So for him to say that it was all for the good, that's a hard thing if you've been through all of that and all of that pain for years after years and misdiagnosed. It'd be hard not to feel somewhat bitter about that, but I guess it's a choice, and you got to look at the cup as half full.
Well, let's start with the beginning. You get addicted to busking.
Yeah, I love it. And it was the first thing. I mean, I only ever had one job in my life when I was 16, working at a co-op. I got fired for throwing sprouts at my coworker. So from that moment forth, I decided that because I mean, I was obsessed with music ever since I was 10 years old, and I was producing beats and selling my mixtapes at festivals as a 13-year-old with this little tiny handheld boombox, and I'd just go and sit by a bunch of people and play the songs. And just, you know, and I was obsessed. At school time, at dinner time, I'd lock myself in the music room and just play piano the whole time, or play guitar. And It was just a real hyperfixation for me. And then, so busking was my way of like, as a 17-year-old is when I first started doing it. It was just my way of, I could go out on the streets and I could do what I love. And then, you know, I wasn't making a huge amount when I first started because I hadn't quite mastered the art of performance or anything yet, but I made enough to be like, oh, cool, I can have a little bit of spending money from doing what I love. And that's when I started pouring myself into it in the art of performance, and yeah, became addicted to just being out on the streets playing. And that was something that I just did throughout whenever I could before my health declined. It was just something that I would do probably 5-6 days a week. I'd be out there for sometimes like 6-7 hours at a time.
Fueled by ADHD?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Because in those, it's just like my brain, which is a very common thing. So ADHD, there's a lot of new research that says it's essentially like a dopamine dependency. So you're constantly seeking these little spikes, and if you're doing something that's not giving you that spike of dopamine, you become disinterested, and you find it very difficult to do. And but with music, I could sit there. It was the only thing that felt meditative for me. I could sit there for hours on end, producing, playing, singing, rehearsing the same lines over and over again. So I think it 100%, and even to this day, it's the same thing.
How interesting. You know, I grew up before they had this diagnosis of ADHD, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if I'd grown up, 30 years later, that would have been my diagnosis. I can totally relate to what he's saying about being bored. I can remember when I first was in grade school, I was a horrible student. I couldn't concentrate on anything that the teacher was saying, but I would stare out the window and look at the birds and the clouds and the sky. And all I thought about was, gosh, I wish I could go out to recess right now. I wish I could go, run around and play on the playground or go explore the woods. I've never heard it put in those terms of needing that dopamine reinforcement, but that makes so much sense and explains so much probably of why I'm on YouTube, why I do so much social media, that I need that little spike as well to keep myself from getting bored. This is kind of amazing that, he's done this research, he's really analyzed himself. People like this are just compelled to escape into the world of music and words and developing intricate rap schemes.
It's the one thing I can sit there happily forgetting to eat all day, just because I just become so immersed in it.
What do you learn about people from busking?
So much, mate. It's very interesting. I become fascinated with the psychology of performance. There was one of the most interesting things I learned is that there are these things called mirror neurons, right? Where if you observe a behavior, you become inclined to repeat it because we're like creatures of community, and we it's why in those talent shows when you watch somebody like gasping or crying at a moment where someone's singing, you feel that emotion just by seeing that person in the crowd. And it's like, because your brain gets activated to mirror those things. So with busking, what I found was really interesting is if you can hold just 1 or 2 people watching you, it instantly creates a space that's safe enough for everybody else to come and watch you. So as long as you like kind of focus your energy on not like, oh no, why am I not getting a crowd? Because that energy almost gets projected out. If you can capture 1 or 2 people's attention, all of a sudden that 2 people turn into 10, turn into 50, turn into 100.
I've observed that myself because I have a small farm, and in the summertime, I go to a couple of farmers markets a week, and I've noticed how streaky sales can be. In other words, you can sit there for 15 minutes and no one will come close, and then one person comes in and starts looking or talking with you, and immediately your booth gets filled up with 5 other people. There's safety in numbers. I've never really related that to the psychology of it, what he's talking about, man being a social animal and reacting to other people or wanting to belong to what other people are doing. I've known it intuitively, but I've never heard the science behind it. That's simply amazing.
Just because they're enabled by other people doing it. probably makes me sound a little bit mental, but I love to people watch while I'm playing because I think it feeds into my performance while I'm doing it. Positive feedback loop, right? Because if the good thing about busking as well is people are there by choice. They haven't bought a ticket, and if they're not enjoying it, they're just like there chatting away. The people who stop to watch you do it completely out of their own free will. So it's a really affirming thing, and then you get this positive feedback loop, which helps me almost forget myself, which is almost my constant goal as a performer, is get rid of the thinking mind, get rid of the self-aware mind, and just be doing and just be. And my favorite moments in life are when I almost forget my physical form and just become whatever song it is, and it kind of comes through me. Some I've had the ability to kind of tap into that flow state like Jimi Hendrix, like Jeff Buckley, that the freedom of performance.
I think that's probably true of other creative endeavors beyond music. I'm not a great musician. I love music. I have played in a rock and roll band as a drummer. I was never much of a good singer, never had the voice for it. But I understand what he's saying, where you lose yourself in the moment and become the song. And I think it's also true of many actors. They place themselves in the role that they're playing, and they forget their own personality, and they just totally inhabit the personality of the character. And then even writing, which I have probably more experience as a writer than anything else. I've written I've written a novel, unpublished, and I've written a biography, which is also unpublished. I've had that experience of the story coming through me and not really be written by me, but just flowing through me. Particularly with the novel, I took some characters that were based on real people that I knew, and then I put them into a plot that never actually happened in real life. But because I knew the characters so well, I was able to extrapolate what they would do in those situations. But I never knew until I sat down at the computer what was going to happen next, where the plot was going to go. But as soon as I sat down, the story would just come to me as I was writing it. And, it wasn't something I was even doing consciously. It was just flowing through me. So I can certainly understand what he's talking about here.
I try and apply it whenever I can, because I think those moments where you become thoughtless, even social interaction, going out dancing, going out partying, enjoying, like running, whatever, when you become less self-aware, things just flow much nicer, and I think life becomes more enjoyable. So it's,
that just triggered another thought in me in sports. Oftentimes you hear players talk about that being in the zone, being unconscious, just not even aware of what you accomplished until life was over. And I'm a lifelong tennis player. I certainly know that the secret to success and top performance is to forget yourself. And forget the last point, and forget the future point, forget what the score is. Just concentrate on you and the ball that you're trying to hit and where you're trying to hit it, and forget everything else. Lose ego.
You get sick. Does it come out of nowhere?
it's funny. I mean, I in terms of the physical symptoms, yes. In terms of, I think, mental health and feeling like a little bit of an outlier and an outsider, I think that was just a constant theme in my life. And maybe it set the stage for a chronic illness getting a hold of my body, because some people don't develop autoimmunity. Some people don't fall into a state of chronic sickness. They get something like Lyme disease, and their body deals with it, and they're okay. But then you have a percentage of people who don't, and there are theories as to why that happens. So I'm not sure if the dis-ease in my body, the dis-ease came from dis-ease and came from a place of discontentment, because I kind of always felt that. I can't even really tell you a time, not to get too heavy, but I can't really tell you a time where I don't think I did feel like that, apart from in the recent years when I've been picking everything apart and then putting it back together again, and I've finally come to a place in my life where I'm feeling a much greater sense of peace and tranquility. And now, luckily, I've gotten to this place where I'm financially independent, and it feels really nice to be a voice for those people, be a voice for the voiceless, be somebody who can tell their story, because my story is so many people's story. And when I started doing the health blogging before, when I was too sick to make music, I realized that there is such a underground community of people who aren't seen, who are just suffering under the surface because they're not dealt with properly by the medical industry, but they're too sick to really speak up about it. So.
You know, I've been experiencing a little medical incident of my own for the last 5 months, I mentioned before, and I'm still not through it. It involves some problems with my abdomen, pain of unknown origin, really. But what's been so disappointing about that is I've gone through like 5 doctors. Finally, I found a physician's assistant who seemed to understand. But, you know, most of the people just kind of didn't even bother to diagnose me. You know, they didn't seem to really care what was causing my problem. And this is in the United States, which supposedly has the greatest medical system in the world. But I don't know, I think the doctors are so overburdened today with so many problems coming out of the COVID and the problems with the treatment of COVID and the changes in our society, that they don't really have the time to take every patient's problem seriously. You know, maybe there's many more people with much worse problems than mine, and so that's why I was kind of ignored. I mean, I've gotten to where I have in the treatment only because I kept pushing and going to another doctor and another doctor and another doctor. Well, how many people are that stubborn? You know, how many people are willing to keep pushing because they want the problem solved? And a lot of people probably just suffer silently in pain and don't get the treatment that they should be getting.
In a nutshell, you were wrongly diagnosed. Like they thought you had something called ME.
Yeah. Well, I was first initially diagnosed with bipolar, which was a misdiagnosis because my symptoms would come cyclically and in waves when I wasn't looking after myself or when I was eating the wrong thing, but I didn't know that at the time.
But that's also connected to Lyme disease.
Yeah, exactly. But I didn't know that. So they were like, oh, well, some days you feel a bit better. Some days you feel like mentally foggy, brain confused. And they're like, well, it sounds like hypercycling bipolar. So I was put on citalopram. I was put on some different SSRIs, which made me a lot worse because I had underlying MCAS, which is this allergic condition. But I didn't know that at the time either. So I just fought through it because I was like, well, the doctors tell me it will even out eventually and I'll be fine eventually. And so I just went through the mill with all these things. Valium was the worst one because of the withdrawals, but I was bouncing from doctor to doctor. And then eventually, as I was deteriorating, they said, well, you're tired loads of the time. You're in pain. Maybe it's like ME, fibromyalgia. And then I'm on a waiting list for a year and I finally get to see that doctor. And then the treatment is resting more. And it's like, I've been in bed for, it's honestly, it's really, the level of care is so bad for people who go through those things. So, you know, I was really hopeful for this appointment for a whole year, went to the appointment and it was just really disappointing. And that was a cycle that went on for years of just like getting my hopes up for something and then getting my hopes obliterated and my physicality being worse off. And it was something that I had to constantly pick myself up from the ground until the point of breaking point in 2015 where it kind of culminated in going into fully blown psychosis because I think my brain had just had enough.
Well, you could understand that. You wait for an appointment for a year and then all you get told is you just need to rest. How frustrating would that be? Oh my God.
Really try to do everything at one point. I mean, you explore fecal transplants.
Yep. Yeah. That was the highlight of my life. That was having somebody else's excrement put in my backside. Was yes, what a journey. That was it was another thing because there's a lot of science behind it, right? So you're implementing someone else's microbiome into your own. So at the time I was like, because I had so many digestive problems, I was like, maybe it's gut based and maybe it's just like this dysbiosis that's throwing my whole body off. So and one of the most researched things, and it was healing things like Crohn's disease, it was healing a lot of autoimmune conditions. Even MS was being slowed down by having these fecal transplants. So, you know, my music wasn't known at the time. I spent 6 months raising £6,000, which was the price of it. You know, don't come from a poor family, so they couldn't help me. So I had to do it myself, really. I started doing these health blogs and reaching out to the chronically ill community, and eventually I raised the money. And there was so much hope. This is just before the psychosis. There was so much hope for that 6 months. At the time I was so ill and so underweight that I couldn't get out of bed. So that whole 6 months I was in bed. Maybe I'd get up and have a shower every few days, but even that was pretty excruciating.
And this is before you know you have Lyme, right?
This is before I know I have Lyme disease, yeah. So I raise the money. I go to stay in this clinic and we do 10 days of the fecal transplant thing, and then my body had an autoimmune reaction to it and it made my symptoms like about 5 times worse. And that for I think for the level of hope that I had, it was like one of the most crushing things ever. And then it was a few weeks after that it was the start of the Seven Sins song. I was literally lying on the kitchen floor, like.
I watched that video, the Seven Sins, and of course, if you don't understand the background that he actually went through all of this, you know, then you're thinking, what in the world is this song about? It's really shocking. But how disappointing. He takes 6 months to raise the money. And 6,000 pounds sounds like a lot of money to raise. He goes through all that, and then it makes it 5 times worse. It's got to be crushing. Oh dear. Now he's going to describe the onset of his psychosis, which is harrowing.
Sort of like with my nails digging into the floor because it was in so much pain. I was just so bitter about the fact that you have your sights set on this thing, you do this thing, and then it not only does it not work, but it makes you worse. And I just remember this thing, and then my mum came down. She came down the stairs and saw me in this state, and then I just felt myself. It was really strange. I kind of felt myself fall through this tunnel. It was almost like quite a spiritual experience, and all of a sudden, it just like. All that pain and everything, it's so bizarre. I still can't really understand what happened. But it's like all my pain stopped, all the weird feelings stopped, and I just felt this weird sense of euphoria. And I came to, and I remember looking around, and I developed this tick, which was like a click in my hands, and I kept doing it, but I was speaking really eloquently to my mum and almost like really witty and funny. And she was kind of like nervously laughing at all the things I was saying. Can't really quite remember what I was saying, but I was in this kind of like manic, euphoric state. I started having loads of strange behaviors. Like I went down into the living room and I couldn't stand the fact that everything wasn't parallel. So I'd move everything parallel. There was a few days of euphoria, and then it turned into just like this intense feeling of dread that I couldn't explain. And I'd wake up at like 3 a.m. sometimes, like screaming as loud as I could, like literally scream. My mum would run in, it'd be like these night terror things. And then my communication went the opposite way, and I couldn't really communicate what was happening, and I developed a vocal stutter where I'd get stuck on words for maybe 2 minutes. So it'd be like just again and again and again. I started becoming quite delusional and thinking that the only explanation for my health struggles could be demonic or some sort of experiment. It was like the only thing that my mind at the time, a rational mind, made sense. There was a time where I decided that the only way to short circuit my reality was to do the thing that was least expected of me. And this one time, while I was in the car with my mum, I jumped out the car on a road. I ran into the road and I took off all my clothes, and I just lay in the middle of the road and caused a traffic jam while I was like laughing hysterically at the sky, because I thought this is the last thing they expect. And if I do this, then all of this is going to stop.
Wow. Inside the mind of a psychotic individual, it's amazing that he came out of that, became an international success, and is able to describe what he went through so articulately. I'm so impressed with this guy, but I'm not going to go on any further in the story here. But it does really explain a lot of the visuals and the stories that you're seeing in some of his recent videos, which I found very hard to relate to or even watch. So I am going to continue to try to understand these videos to the point where I can have something useful to say about them. No doubt, very, very intelligent young man and a very, very talented musician. More to come.
Holding in the way, that's what I heard him say. They used to heed the words he said, but that was yesterday. Gold will turn to gray, and youth will fade away. They'll never care about you, call you holding in the way.